First message appeared at exactly 12:01 a.m. Olivia Carter awoke to the soft whisper of paper. Her bedroom was silent, but something felt off. The air was still. Too still. Then she saw it. A single white envelope sat on her nightstand. Her breath hitched. She hadn't put it there. Her penthouse was impenetrable. Private security. Reinforced locks. A 24/7 surveillance system that no one, not even her most trusted employees, could bypass. And yet, someone had been here. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the envelope. The paper was smooth, crisp, untouched by time. She turned it over. No name, no return address. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she unfolded the paper. A single line, typed in perfectly even spacing. Regret is a slow poison. A chill ran down her spine. She scanned the room, the closet, the door, the shadows. Nothing. The security panel blinked a steady green. The system was still armed. Impossible. Olivia forced a breath, her heart thudding against her ribs. A prank. That was all this was. A former employee? A bitter ex-lover? She had plenty of enemies. She had built an empire on betrayal. Without hesitation, she strode to the fireplace and tossed the note into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, the words disappearing into nothingness. A pathetic scare tactic, she muttered, shaking off the unease curling in her stomach. But 2 nights later, another note appeared. This time, inside her car. She had parked her Mercedes in her private gated garage. Security cameras covered every inch of the space. And yet, when she opened the driver's side door, there it was. A white envelope sitting neatly on her leather seat. Her pulse spiked. Her hands shook as she ripped it open. Another message. Justice takes time, but it never forgets. A sharp pang of unease stabbed through her chest. She darted her gaze around the empty parking structure. Silent, motionless, but she felt it. A presence, like someone had just been there, watching her. She clenched her fists, forcing her breath to steady. Number. She refused to let fear take hold. A coincidence, she muttered under her breath. That's all. Still, that night, she double-checked every lock, and yet the third message still found her. This time, inside her office, inside a locked drawer, a place only she had access to. Her assistant swore up and down no one had entered. The security footage? Completely clean. No one had come in, and yet the letter sat there, waiting. Olivia's stomach churned as she slowly unfolded the paper. We all pay for what we've done. Eventually. She dropped the note like it had burned her. Her breathing turned shallow, her fingers digging into the desk. Someone was inside her life, inside her walls. They weren't just sending threats. They were in her space, watching. Then, her phone rang. A sharp, jarring sound that made her jolt. She snatched it off the desk, her heart hammering. Ms. Carter? A calm, professional voice. This is James from First National Bank. There's been an issue with your accounts. A lump formed in her throat. What issue? She asked, her voice clipped, controlled. A pause. Then, the words that made her blood run cold. All of your assets have been frozen. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. That's impossible, she hissed, gripping the phone tighter. Fix it, now. Another pause. Then the banker's voice turned lower. I'm afraid we received an anonymous report of financial fraud. There's a formal investigation. A sharp, ice-cold dagger stabbed through her gut. Her entire empire, the stolen millions, the businesses, the real estate holdings, all of it was suddenly untouchable. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her entire world was crashing down in real time. She pressed a hand to her forehead, her vision narrowing. "Who?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. The banker hesitated, and then, in a quiet, measured tone, he said, "A confidential source." The line crackled. Olivia's grip tightened on the phone. Her pulse roared in her ears, because deep in her gut, she already knew. Who was behind this? And why now, after all these years? The Carter family estate was a monument to success, an empire built from the ground up by Richard Carter, a man who never believed in shortcuts. He had started with nothing and turned a struggling real estate firm into a multi-million-dollar dynasty. People called him a visionary, a kingmaker, a man who rewarded loyalty. But for all his wisdom, he had made one fatal mistake. He had trusted both of his daughters to play fair. Emma and Olivia Carter were raised with the same opportunities, the same lessons, the same expectations. But they were nothing alike. Emma was the quiet, patient one. The one who worked beside their father, who learned the business from the ground up, who believed in legacy over greed. Olivia? She was the shark, ambitious, manipulative, and never satisfied. For years, their father had overlooked the warning signs. The way Olivia lied effortlessly when it suited her. The way she studied people's weaknesses and exploited them without remorse. Richard Carter had always believed that blood was thicker than ambition. He didn't realize the war had already begun, and by the time he did, it was too late. The moment Richard Carter fell ill, Olivia saw her opening. While Emma was by his bedside, feeding him, helping him breathe, holding his hand during the long, painful nights. Olivia was making other plans. She met with lawyers, she bribed key officials, she forged documents, and when the moment came, she struck. Richard Carter was barely gone when Emma received the call. "You're required at the attorney's office for the reading of the will." Her hand still smelled like his cologne. She hadn't even finished sorting through his things, hadn't fully processed that her father was gone. And yet, she went, because she trusted her father. She believed in justice. She never saw the knife coming. The office was cold, clinical, impersonal. A room filled with expensive suits and stone-faced lawyers. Olivia sat at the far end of the table, legs crossed, fingers tapping against the armrest, smirking. Emma barely had time to take a seat before the will was read, and with each word, her heart cracked. "To my daughter, Olivia Carter, I leave the Carter estate, including all properties, shares, and assets. To my daughter, Emma Carter, I leave..." A pause. Emma leaned forward, her chest tight. "A single trust fund of $5,000. The words rang like a gunshot. Emma froze. What? Her stomach twisted into a cold knot. That couldn't be right. It wasn't possible. She turned to Olivia, disbelief flooding her face. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered. But Olivia? She just smiled, a slow, lazy curve of her lips. "It's not." Emma's hands clenched into fists. Her father would never do this. He had promised they would share everything. He had wanted them to run the empire together. "Dad would never..." Olivia leaned in, eyes gleaming. "He's not here to argue, is he?" A sharp knife of realization buried itself into Emma's chest. She forged it. Emma's pulse roared in her ears. "You did this," she breathed, voice trembling. But Olivia laughed, like it was all a game. "Prove it." The lawyers didn't blink. The documents were sealed, signed, and legally binding. Emma had no proof, no evidence, no power, and Olivia knew it. Emma looked around the room, expecting someone to stand up, to say something. No one did. She had no allies. She had already lost. Her world was crumbling, and the person sitting across from her, her own flesh and blood, was smiling as it burned. That day, Emma lost everything. Her father's house? Taken. Her father's company? Stolen. Her inheritance? Erased. And as she walked out of the attorney's office, the weight of betrayal suffocating her, Olivia's final words followed her like a shadow. "Life is business, Emma. And you just lost." Emma didn't cry, didn't scream. She just walked away. And for 10 years, Olivia never looked back. For the next decade, Olivia Carter became a legend. She expanded the business, crushed competition, and built an empire of wealth and power. She lived in glass penthouses overlooking the city. She graced magazine covers as a business mogul. She sat at tables with presidents and billionaires. Emma? She was nothing. She had disappeared without a trace. To Olivia, she was erased, a ghost, a bad memory, and that was the end of it. Or so she thought. Because 10 years later, something changed. First the notes, then the messages, then her accounts were frozen. Olivia tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize it, but deep down, she felt it. A presence, a force moving against her, close, calculated, patient. Someone was inside her life, inside her walls, someone who knew exactly how to break her. And as she sat in her office that night, staring at the last note she had received, she felt something she hadn't felt in 10 years. Fear. Where did Emma go? And more importantly, was she really gone? They say time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal. It sharpens. I learned that lesson the hard way. The day Olivia stole everything, something inside me shattered. Not just my life, not just my future, but my trust in the world. I walked out of that lawyer's office as nobody. No inheritance, no home, no identity. But what Olivia never understood was patience. I didn't disappear. I waited. Because revenge is an art, and the best revenge is slow, is silent, is perfect. For 10 years, I let her believe she had erased me. I let her think I had disappeared into the void. I watched her laugh at parties, pose for magazine covers, expand her empire. I saw her live the life that should have been mine, and I never made a sound. But all along, I was studying her, learning her weaknesses, finding the cracks in her empire, waiting for the exact moment to strike. And when that moment finally came, I took everything from her. I didn't attack her all at once. That would have been too easy. Instead, I started small, subtle, a missing document here, a delayed contract there, a slight dip in stock value. Things no one noticed at first. But like a single hairline fracture in glass, the damage spreads. And then came the whispers. Anonymous emails sent to her business partners, hints of financial fraud leaking into the stock market, rumors that Olivia Carter's empire wasn't as stable as it seemed. Still, Olivia didn't panic, not yet. She had built her empire on confidence and control. She was untouchable, unstoppable. But all it takes to sink a ship is one unseen leak. And my first leak? Her hidden offshore accounts. At 8:45 a.m., Olivia stepped into her luxury high-rise office, expecting another day of effortless domination. By 8:47 a.m., her phone rang. She barely glanced at the caller ID before answering. "This is Carter." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, dangerous. "Ms. Carter, this is Agent Daniels with the IRS. We need to discuss some discrepancies in your financial records." Silence. Olivia stiffened. Her hand tightened around the receiver. "Discrepancies?" she repeated, forcing her voice to stay even. But her pulse had already spiked. "Yes, Ms. Carter. We've received an anonymous tip about unreported offshore accounts and fraudulent tax filings spanning the last decade. We will be launching a full-scale audit immediately." The words hit her like a gunshot. The air in her office felt thinner. Her brain scrambled for answers. Her offshore accounts were hidden, buried under shell companies, blind trusts, and international loopholes. No one knew. No one except number. Emma was gone, wasn't she? The voice on the phone continued. "A team will be arriving at your headquarters this afternoon to collect documents. Any attempt to conceal or delete records will be treated as obstruction of justice." Click. The line went dead, and for the first time in years, Olivia Carter felt fear. By noon, Olivia's accountants were in a full-blown panic. By 2 p.m., her legal team was preparing for emergency damage control. By 4 p.m., the stock in Carter Enterprises plummeted by 12%. By 6 p.m., her investors started pulling out. Phone calls, emails, damage control meetings. She fought to maintain control, but something was wrong. Everywhere she turned, she was losing grip. Her bank accounts, frozen. Her assets, under investigation. Her lawyers, worried. This wasn't just bad luck. This was calculated. Someone was moving against her. Someone inside her world. And that night, she received another message. It was past midnight when Olivia entered her bedroom. Exhausted, furious, unsettled. She locked the doors behind her, checked the alarm system twice. Then she saw it. A single white envelope, sitting neatly on her bedside table. Her blood turned to ice. She hadn't heard anyone enter, hadn't seen a shadow, hadn't felt a presence. But somehow, it was there. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper, and when she read it, her entire body went cold. This is just the beginning. A shiver crawled up her spine. Her breath came faster. Her eyes darted to the security camera mounted in the corner. She grabbed her phone, checked the feed. Nothing. No break-in. No movement. But the note was real. And suddenly, for the first time in her life, she didn't feel safe in her own home. Olivia is starting to break. But how far will Emma push? Revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience. I learned that lesson the moment Olivia took everything from me. When I walked out of that lawyer's office 10 years ago, I wasn't just homeless and penniless. I was erased. And Olivia? She stood at the top of an empire built on betrayal, laughing, winning, untouchable. Or so she thought. Because when you steal a person's entire life, you create an enemy with nothing left to lose. And that's the most dangerous kind. For 10 years, I didn't just wait. I built myself back up, not out of desperation, not out of survival, but out of pure, calculated revenge. I studied her habits, her weaknesses, her blind spots. I learned everything. And the moment I was ready, I turned her own power against her. Every empire stands on pillars, wealth, influence, loyalty. Take out one, and the empire shakes. Take out all three, and the empire crumbles. So I began where she least expected. I attacked her in the shadows, the IRS. Just a smokescreen, a distraction to make her look in the wrong direction. While she was busy fighting the government, I was pulling strings in the dark. Her top investor? A perfectly timed leak about his insider trading. Her CFO? An email exposing missing funds. Her most trusted attorney? A forged message making him think she was about to throw him under the bus. Within weeks, her business was rotting from the inside. Trust shattered. Partnerships collapsed. Employees turned on her, and she still didn't know it was me. That was the real beauty of it. She wasn't just losing control. She was losing her mind. Olivia Carter was known for her iron will. She never broke, never faltered. So I made sure that before I took her money, her power, her legacy, I took her sanity. It started with the small things. Keys disappearing, contracts mysteriously missing, doors left unlocked when she swore she had locked them. She fired 3 assistants in 2 months. She stopped sleeping. Her once perfect control of her empire slipping. Then I pushed harder. Her head of security was the first to go. She accused him of incompetence, demanded to know how the notes were getting into her home. But the answer was always the same. The cameras saw nothing. The locks were never broken. No forced entry. Yet the notes kept coming. And the more they came, the worse she unraveled. I knew I had her when I saw the first headline in the news. Olivia Carter, billionaire under investigation for fraud. The media smelled blood. And the public? They were waiting for her to fall. But she wasn't just losing her reputation. She was losing herself. And then I made my next move. Olivia's assistant, Vanessa, had been by her side for 6 years. Loyal, trustworthy, devoted. But trust is fragile, and fear makes people dangerous. So I found Vanessa, and I made her an offer. Not just money. I gave her a way out, a 6-figure escape plan, and all she had to do was plant 1 small USB drive into Olivia's laptop. Vanessa hesitated. She didn't want to betray Olivia. But when I showed her what I had, emails, calls, evidence of Olivia planning to fire her, evidence that Olivia had been using her as a scapegoat. Vanessa didn't hesitate after that, and the next morning, Olivia sealed her own fate. She opened her laptop, completely unaware, and in less than 10 minutes, the FBI had everything they needed. At 3:15 p.m., federal agents raided her corporate offices. At 3:16 p.m., Olivia finally understood. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was war. That night, Olivia sat in her darkened penthouse. Her phone was dead. Her accounts were frozen. Her business was in ruins. The world she had spent a decade building was crumbling around her, and she had no idea who had done it. She sat there staring at her reflection in the glass window. For the first time in her life, she was powerless. Then, she heard it. A soft rustling. She turned. Her breath caught. A white envelope, sitting neatly on her bedside table. A shiver crawled up her spine. She grabbed it with trembling hands. Slowly, she opened it. And this time, there was no cryptic message, just a single photograph. A picture of me, sitting at a cafe, looking straight into the camera, a cold, knowing smile on my lips, and beneath the photo, a single line of text. Checkmate. Olivia now knows. But does she have any fight left in her? She stared at the photograph. Her hands trembled. The face in the picture, Emma, sitting at a cafe, staring into the camera, smiling. That smile. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't rage. It was worse. It was control. Cold. Calculated. Complete. The air felt thick, suffocating. She dropped the note, scrambling for her phone. Her fingers fumbled as she tried to dial. Dead. She grabbed her landline. Disconnected. She rushed to her laptop, breath shallow, vision spinning. The screen flickered. Access denied. Her personal accounts gone. Her offshore funds erased. Everything she had stolen, everything she had built, vanished. And then, a soft knock at the door. Her heart stopped. She turned. The penthouse was empty. No one should have been there. The security system had been armed, hadn't it? Another knock. A slow, deliberate knock. She stepped closer, and then the door swung open on its own. A cold gust of wind blew through the penthouse, and there, standing in the dim light of the hallway, Emma, Not a ghost, not a hallucination, not a nightmare. Real, alive, and in control. "Hello, Olivia." Her face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at me as if she were seeing death itself. And in a way she was, because Olivia Carter, as she knew herself, was already dead. Her money, gone. Her power, destroyed. Her legacy, a scandal etched in history. The empire she had stolen from our father. It wasn't just ruined. It was mine now. I had made sure of it. She collapsed into a chair, hands gripping the armrest so tight her knuckles turned white. "You ... Her voice cracked. "You did this?" I tilted my head, mocking her disbelief. "Oh, Olivia, after everything you did to me, did you really think I wouldn't come back?" Her chest rose and fell rapidly, fear, real, tangible, drowning her. "You destroyed me." My voice was even, calm, controlled. "You erased me. You thought you won." I leaned in, my eyes locking onto hers. "But you forgot one thing." Her breath hitched. The past never stays buried. She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." She forced her voice to stay strong. "I'll rebuild. I always do." I laughed. Software dangerous. Final. "No, you won't." She frowned, her lips twitching, that old arrogance fighting to rise. Then I pulled out the final envelope. One last piece of paper. I placed it on the table between us. She hesitated before picking it up. She scanned the words, and then her entire body went still. Her hands began to shake. Her face twisted in horror. Her breath came in short, choked gasps. "No." It was barely a whisper. "No, no, no. This is fake." But she knew. She knew it wasn't. I had legally taken everything. The Carter estate, transferred to my name. Her penthouse, seized. Her businesses, liquidated. Her legal team, flipped against her. She was no longer Olivia Carter, the billionaire CEO. She was just Olivia. A disgraced criminal with no money, no power, no future. And to make it worse, I didn't even need to break the law to do it. I just played the game better, and she lost. I reached into my pocket and slid something else across the table. A one-way plane ticket. "You have two choices," I said, voice steady. "Leave tonight and disappear forever, or stay and rot in the mess you made." She stared at the ticket, her hands balled into fists. For a moment I saw it, the fight in her eyes, the Olivia Carter who had crushed anyone in her way. But that Olivia was gone, because the only thing more terrifying than losing, knowing you will never get it back. She knew it was over. No more power, no more connections, no more control. Her only option was exile, to disappear, to fade into nothingness, to become exactly what she had turned me into a decade ago. Her hands shook as she reached for the ticket, and then she turned to me, eyes burning with hatred. "I'll come back," she whispered, voice hoarse. "One day, I'll come back." I met her gaze, holding it with cold amusement. "No, Olivia," I said softly. "You won't." Was this truly the end, or just the beginning? I watched her go, watched as she clutched that one-way ticket like it was the last thing keeping her alive. Watched as she stumbled toward the door, a woman stripped of everything she had ever stolen. No security, no allies, no future. She didn't look back, because she knew there was nothing left to see. For the first time, Olivia Carter was a nobody. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I let out a slow breath. Was it satisfaction? Relief? Victory? I wasn't sure. Because here's the thing about revenge. It never feels the way you expect it to. Did I win? Yes. Did I destroy her? Absolutely. But as I sat there, in her penthouse, now mine, overlooking the city she once ruled, I felt something else. A question. One I couldn't shake. Because in the end, if you spend 10 years becoming a monster to destroy another, do you ever really stop being one? If you had the chance to destroy the person who ruined your life, would you?